Treasury Department just issued a statement that the U.S. now needs to borrow $500 billion, actually specifically it's $514 billion this quarter. So I did go to community college, but that tells me we need to do that 3 more times for 1 year. That's a 320% increase on its previous estimate. In case you're wondering about the debt, joining me now, a great senator from the state of Wisconsin, Senator Ron Johnson's here to discuss that, amongst other things. Okay, Senator, why are we borrowing so much money?
Because we're spending so much money. And we're spending money that we don't have. We're spending more money than we take in through tax revenue. So we're running these enormous deficits. And unfortunately, the public is not outraged by it. And as a result, very few people here in Washington, D.C. are concerned about it as well. They're just whistling by the graveyard. I'm one of the few that's not.
Okay, so how do we make the public make the connection between inflation, which everyone's mad about inflation? Everybody, it was one of the drivers of people in the election, but they're okay with spending. They're okay with the $1 trillion here. They're okay with $500 billion there. But then the next moment, they're complaining about the grocery prices. How do American people not make this connection?
Well, first of all, we don't educate the American public. We don't educate them in economics or really our form of government. And so they're largely uninformed. But it's pretty obvious to me, inflation is pretty easy to define. It's too many dollars chasing too few goods. So when you're spending massive amounts of dollars we don't have, the only way to spend that money is you print them. And so you create more dollars chasing too few goods. That's what sparked 40-year high inflations. We went on this massive spending spree under COVID. We went from $4.4 trillion to $6.5 trillion next year. We've averaged $6.5 trillion over the last 5 years. And you've heard me say this, no family, if they had an illness and they had to borrow $50,000 to pay for medical bills, if that family member got well, would keep borrowing $50,000 and spend at that level. That's exactly what we've done, which is why I continue to insist that we return to a reasonable pre-pandemic spending level. But unfortunately, the big, beautiful bill reconciliation process is not resulting, from what I can see, in returning to a pre-pandemic level, because once you start spending money, there are constituencies for that free federal money, and everybody's afraid, well, you can't cut that, you can't cut that, you can't cut that. It's the wrong way of looking at things. The way to look at it is, listen, we went from 4.4 to now about $7 trillion. Let's set spending levels at a reasonable baseline based on pre-pandemic levels. I've given people options somewhere between $5.5 and $6.5 trillion. $6.5 trillion ought to be our maximum amount. We should spend no more than $6.5 trillion in fiscal year 2026.
Okay, so where is all this budget reconciliation process? Because I feel like you and I had this conversation a friggin' month ago when we were working on the Senate portion and the House portion, and they're trying to where are we on all this? Are we going to have a bill by close of business? Where are we?
Well, I'm not going to vote for it, not the way it's rolling out right now. Again, there's a couple of ways of addressing spending. One is to institute some controls and live by them. That's the way you do in the private sector. In the private sector, if my manager said, if I told them, listen, you can increase your budgets based on inflation and the number of customers you serve, I'm okay with that. But I come back 5 years later and those budgets are 5 or 10 or 20% higher than that. Say, well, you knuckleheads, you can't do that. Bring your budget back in line with what you spent 5 years ago, plus inflation and population growth. That's what the $5.5 to $6.5 trillion level is, depending on which year outlay you're looking at. What's happening here in Washington, D.C. is they accept the $7 trillion. They look at all these programs, and they say, well, we can't touch that, can't touch that, can't touch that. Oh, that one, we can tweak that one a little bit. So they tweak it. They go to CBO, they get a score. And then they come back from CBO, they do the arithmetic exercise and go, okay, we've tweaked about 4 or 5 different programs and we've saved X. So that's as good as we can do. And we don't have the votes for it. Quite honestly, because we're not getting leadership from President Trump on this, and we're really not getting leadership from either the speaker or, listen, I think the majority leader in the Senate, John Thune, has been totally behind my budget review panel, which would look at the budget line by line. That's what we have to do. We have to do the work. And by the way, Elon Musk showed us how to do it with Doge. That's what he's doing. He's looking at individual expenditures and contracts, and he's exposing how grotesque the spending is, how we're spending taxpayer dollars or borrowed dollars on things that the American people don't support, that we shouldn't be spending money on. But if you're not willing to do that work and go through that level of detail, you end up with where we're at. We're $7 trillion, and maybe we can shave 100 or 150 billion dollars a year off of that and be what, at $6.85 trillion? I mean, it's just completely unacceptable. That's why I'm speaking out right now. I'm putting people on notice. I'm not voting for that. What you ought to do is go to a multi-step process. Again, get the president the money he needs to secure the border. I would just extend the current tax law. It's a mess. I hate it. It's too complex. But let's prevent a massive automatic tax increase, which, by the way, was the blunder of the 2017 tax law. We allowed it to automatically expire. That's stupid. We shouldn't have allowed it to do, but that's what we're facing. So correct that mistake. And we can do that simply. A one sentence bill, extend current tax law, take a massive tax increase off the table. Then let's get down and let's do the hard work, line by line. Let's figure out how to return to a pre-pandemic level. Let's set processes in place so we can do it again. We've never had a process to limit government spending. We don't have a balanced budget requirement. The Budget Act, the Simpson-Bowles, the Budget Control Act, none of these things ever controlled federal spending. This reconciliation process won't control it either. That's obvious. They're not getting down to a pre-pandemic level, which is why I'm speaking out.
Senator, President Trump sat down with Terry Moran, ABC, and talked about the tariffs. Here he was.
145% tariffs on China, and that's good. Basically
That's
an
good.
embargo.
They deserve it.
It'll raise prices on
They
everything
deserve
from
it.
electronics to clothing to building houses.
You don't know that. You don't know whether or not China's going to eat it.
That's mathematics.
China probably will eat those tariffs, but at 145, they basically can't do much business with the United States. And they were making from us $1 trillion a year. They were ripping us off like nobody's ever ripped us off. And by the way, we have other countries that were just as bad. If you look at the European Union, it was terrible what they've done to us. Every country, almost every country in the world was ripping us off. They're not doing that anymore.
Senator, are the tariffs responsible for the 0.3% drop in GDP? Is it the spend? What is it? What happened? Why are we shrinking?
No, I mean, the tariffs haven't had any impact on our economy yet, other than create an awful lot of uncertainty and instability, which is drying up investment. And that's something the Trump administration really needs to be concerned about. If they don't conclude these trade deals, if we don't return stability and certainty to the economy, we are going to have a huge mess in our hand. Now, listen, the Biden administration, whatever economic growth we got, was primarily fueled by this massive deficit spending, which also devalued our dollar. A dollar you held at the end of 2019 is only worth 80 cents today. Okay, if you held it in 1998, it's only worth 51 cents. And we've just continued to devalue our dollar through all this massive deficit spending. That's why people can't afford things. Listen, there's a real problem in terms of what manufacturing of crucial products we've offshored, pharmaceuticals, high-end semiconductors, rare earth minerals. There's a list of these things. We need to focus on how do you bring those things back. We need to figure out some way to deal with China because they are breaking all the rules. I mean, I totally agree with that. I don't think it's going to be as inflationary as some people say because that tariff is being applied to the cost of goods coming from China before all the markups. I think it could have an inflationary impact. I'm concerned about the instability within supply chains. There are a lot of people that, again, they've set up these supply chains over decades. You can be upset about them for doing that, but you can't reestablish supply chains overnight. So it's going to be highly disruptive. My role is really let the administration understand exactly how disruptive. Hopefully, the administration, once they get through these initial negotiations, will look at different exemptions to make sure we're not imposing self-inflicted wounds on our economy and good American businesses that are trying to do the right thing.
All right, finally, Senator, the judges. Everybody's mad about the judges. I can only imagine what your emails look like. My emails are a disaster. People are ready for Julius Caesar to cross the Rubicon at this point in time. They wake up every single morning and they see some new judge is stopping this and stopping that. Can the Senate do anything?
Well, we have too many Democrats here, so we can't and won't. Here's who needs to fix this is Chief Justice Roberts. He's the head of the judicial branch. They've got to rein in these out-of-control district judges. By the way, one thing the Trump administration is doing, and I completely agree with it, they went in, they arrested the circuit judge in Wisconsin who obstructed justice when ICE agents or federal agents were trying to arrest somebody in a safe manner inside the courthouse. she obstructed justice. I'm shocked. I actually applaud my radical left, the Wisconsin Supreme Court, for basically disqualifying her from sitting for the time being. That's good. That judge needs to pay the ultimate penalty or the maximum penalty in terms of what would be assessed to any other American citizen obstructing justice and endangering the public the way she did.
Yeah, she certainly does. Senator, thank you as always. I appreciate you, sir. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.